So good morning, welcome to our Planning Your Oral History webinar. For those of you who I've not met before, my name's Fran Stovold and I'm the Workforce Development Lead for Sporting Heritage. So I look after all the webinar programme, our network meetings and importantly our conference, which is coming up in October. So if you don't have the dates in your diary already, it's the 20th and 21st of October and all the details are on our website. I'll put the details in the chat a bit later on in the session. I'll just do a quick bit of housekeeping. Our session is going to be led by Anita, so I'm going to hand over to her in a moment. But if anything goes wrong during the session, for example, if your tech fails, just log back in. I'll keep an eye on the waiting room and let you back in. If the tech fails at our end, I will message everybody and let everybody know whether we can resolve it and get ourselves back up and running within our allotted time frame or whether we're looking to reschedule. We'll be using the chat as we go along, but as you can see, we're quite a small group today. So there'll be lots of opportunity for us to just talk amongst ourselves. And I know that Anita is very keen to get us chatting about the experience that we've had and any plans and projects that we've got going forward. So I hope you're all feeling in a chatty mood. I think that's everything I have to say at the moment. If anybody has any questions, do put them in the chat. Anita, I'll hand over to you to kickstart the session.
Morning, everybody. It's lovely to see you all. I hope you've all got a lovely sunny day like we have here. It's really very nice, perfect for a webinar where we want to chat about things. So hopefully you're all up for having a chat. Please do put your mics on if you'd like to join in. But just to give you a little bit of a background about me, I'm Anita Broad and I'm an oral historian. And I run training workshops on interview techniques and as we're going to do today, planning your oral history project. Background in oral history is that I did a master's degree in oral history back in 2010-11. And since then I've developed this love of collecting people's memories and helping people to do it for themselves too. So I do quite a lot of work with community groups, sporting organisations and schools, both primary and secondary. So I have quite a lot of experience in project work. I've ran my own project. I'm also a sports coach. I coach stallball, which you may or may not have heard of, but it's very popular in the southeast, particularly East and West Sussex. And it was through my love of stallball, which is an ancient sport, I decided that I wanted to discover more about my own club. And I used some oral histories of my club members and intergenerational history for my master's dissertation. So that's how I came to it. I'm a sports historian, I'm a player, I'm a coach, all of those things, which brought me to my love of oral history. So that being said, I wondered if you could all give us, each of us, a bit of history about yourself, about what your interest is in oral history and whether you have a project in mind or whether you've worked on one or whether you haven't even thought about it yet and are just planning what you might be able to do. So if I go round the group, and I'll go round on my screen, which may not be the same as yours. But if I start with Janet, could you just give us a little introduction into what you are planning or what you've done or why you've come today? Hang on a second. Can't quite hear Janet. Still can't hear Janet. Okay, shall I come back to you, Janet? Okay, so next on my screen is Claire.
Hello, I'm Claire. I live in Bungay in Suffolk on the Norfolk-Suffolk border, and I work for the Roots programme. We do exchanges between people, adults and young people in the UK who have very different lived experiences of the same society. So we pair public schools with state schools. We bring those together as in partnerships. And I work on the adult exchange, which is 2 adults from probably very different places who live very, very different lifestyles to come and just talk over 6 weeks. We have activities, and with the Roots program, I've been reading lots of Studs Terkel and Tony Parker, and I've become completely obsessed with the mass observation project over the lockdown. And I'm going to try and bring this together as another form of exchange. And I would like to do an oral history project within neighbourhoods, training and supporting neighbours to interview neighbours. I've been doing it through the summer, interviewing my own neighbours across the 3 themes. So we've been doing the neighbourhood of your childhood, the neighbours, neighbourhood and home of your childhood, really. Your experience of neighbourliness through lockdown, and the kind of neighbourhood that you would like to see. And so I'm trying to build a heritage lottery project around that. And I'm doing lots of trials, and lots of the childhood neighbourhood stuff the material that I've been getting is around the games that were played in neighbourhoods and the local sports clubs. Hardly any scouts and brownies and whatnot, which is what I thought people would talk about, but it's more about connecting through games and sports. So that's me.
Oh, that's really interesting, and this is going to be perfect for you then, because you're at those early stages trying to decide how your project will come together and how you're going to form it.
Yeah.
No, that's really fascinating, isn't it? I'm sure you must have learned so much from talking to your neighbours over the past, well, probably 2 years.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, previously I've done Reminiscence I did a project for the NHS as a freelancer, and I did 65 life stories. So I've got a bit of experience, although it's quite a while ago, in being able to work my way through a sort of structure in my mind, so that I can never leave somebody hanging, but can leave enough space for someone else to be able to speak. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's lovely. Thank you so much, Claire. Right, so shall we go to Nick next? He's next on my screen now that Janet's moved.
Sorry.
So shall we have Nick next?
Hi, yeah. So I'm Nick. I'm working on a new football museum for Wales, based in Wrexham Museum. So I, previous to that, I worked at the National Football Museum in Manchester. So I've kind of had some oral history training a few years ago, but haven't really done any oral history projects or work. So it's something that I definitely think we'd like to include in the new museum. But yeah, I haven't had kind of much experience with it, certainly on the football side at present. But I think early ideas might be to interview certainly fan sort of reminiscences, perhaps players as well. Thinking about games from sort of long period ago, retired players, for example. Although we did, there has been a submission for National Sporting Heritage Day, some reminiscences from fans at Welsh fans at Euro 2016, but I've sort of supported that rather than had active involvement in that. So yeah, so kind of learn a bit more really, and have a think about what we might do in the future. Really, that's me.
Great. That's really interesting, Nick, because again, it's about forming project ideas and then knowing what you need to bring to those project ideas in your planning. And that's, so this is going to be great. We're going to learn a lot here. Thank you, Nick. Ruth, you're next on my whiz round the screen.
Hello, I work for a charity called Football Unites Racism Divides in Sheffield. I've got 2 different roles there. Resources and information worker is one that I've been doing for about 20 years or so there. I'm a librarian by trade, work at Sheffield University as well in the library. So we've got a specialist library there, and been sort of on the periphery of a few sort of heritage projects that we've worked on at Ferd over the years. For example, the Arthur Wharton Heritage Project about world's first black professional footballer, one or two other things. Like you, Anita, I'm also a player and a coach as well. So the last few years I've kind of branched out and started also running some women and girls football for Ferd, which started as a voluntary thing and it's now paid a little bit. So trying to increase participation and diversity amongst women's football, and it's been in my mind for ages about kind of how we should save women's memories of what football was like, or trying to get access to football back in the day, and how much it's changed in a quite short space of time. So trying to bring all my different jobs and bits of experience together to work on what we're calling the Time Project, which is looking at the history of women's football in the Sheffield and Rotherham area, and the kind of impetus. That was partly this year is the centenary of when the FA banned women from playing on FA affiliated grounds. It's the 50th anniversary of the lifting of the ban, and it was due to be the year when the Women's Euros were being played in Sheffield amongst other places. That's been postponed to next year. But anyway, so I'm starting to do some research, and hope interviewing people is going to be a part of that. And initial indications are that women, particularly of a certain sort of age, can be quite reticent about being interviewed. So
yeah,
absolutely, getting people to talk and what sort of formats are best, filming, audio, written stuff, whatever, and advice on how to store it, make sure it doesn't get lost in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how people's histories are there, and it's drawing them out, because a lot of people are reticent about speaking, and we won't actually be talking about the pros and cons of audio recording and against video recording today, but that might be something we can discuss another time. But it's great to hear what you're doing, and especially now that racism is just so up front and central, and we have to do everything we can. You may or may not have heard of a local club to me, Lewis Football Club. They're doing so much for women and girls, really leading the way, vanguards. Thank you, Ruth. That's really interesting, and we will be talking more about our projects later. Janet, next on my screen.
Thank you. Sorry about the interruption at the beginning, but I've had a new notebook and I was trying to use it for the first time, and clearly it's not set up properly. I'm Janet Wrighton. I'm a former President, Chairman, Vice Chairman of England Netball, and a Director of the World Federation of Netball. I've been involved with netball for over 60 years. And like me, there are so many, and I've never been paid a penny for any of the voluntary work I've done, of course. I am a qualified coach. I was a player. England Netball, some 3-4 years ago, decided that we needed to start getting the history of netball, because clearly it's a very successful sport in this country. We've been able to partnership up with Huddersfield University, which is where we keep our archives, well, the ones that we've collected so far. And I think generally in the beginning, it's been a case of picking out photographs of things that have happened in the past. But clearly, without the volunteers, then clearly this netball would not have been successful. And we've just got so much to thank them for. And we have obviously found out very recently that some of our older volunteers are sadly leaving us. They're taking all their history with them. And so I'm now leading a group on doing exactly what Ruth is going to do, and try to get some of our older volunteers to actually give us their story. I've never done anything before. I've listened to one oral history of a past president and captain and England team member who's in her 90s, and I had the pleasure of meeting with her on Saturday just for a catch-up. But I've never done it, although from that oral history, I just wrote a few questions down that might be something I would ask, but I'm completely new to it, so I would prefer to start from a clean sheet.
Great, thank you, Janet. That's coming to things very new is also really interesting, because you will get a background of all the things that you need to think about for an oral history project. We won't actually be going over oral history interview techniques today, but it's maybe something we can talk about later. Fabulous, thank you, Janet. And last on my screen, but not least, is Brian. Hi, Brian.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I suppose I started out on oral history when I started writing sports-related education materials back in 2007. The first resource that I wrote was for Huddersfield University for a cricket project, and then on to Burnley Football Club, and it sort of grew from there. But each of those resources had particular themes based on interviews. So, for example, if I was covering the heritage of a club, I would try to interview the manager of the women's team, the physio, the groundsman, players, referees, if I could as well, to get different aspects and different angles on the sport and things that would feed into an education resource. So you're covering not just history, but so the science of groundsmanship, the science of physiotherapy, that sort of thing. From there, it's my sort of career gradually evolved and I became project manager of Huddersfield Giants Heritage Project, where we were trained in oral history by an organisation called Vox Pops, a private company, and also worked with the Sporting Memories Foundation. And there was clear crossover. Although we kept those two aspects separate within the project, it was obvious there was crossover between oral history and what Sporting Memories do in relation to dementia. I then did a similar project for the Lancashire Cricket League, a pilot project, where again we trained volunteers in interviewing, and we also trained school children in interviewing and had lots of intergenerational interviews. And then I was lucky enough to work with Sporting Memories, and we put in a joint funding bid to the whole City of Culture. And we ran what I think is still a unique project, where we combined oral history with what Sporting Memories do in dementia, and produced what's now an education resource that's available in Hull that covers both aspects. So it looks at understanding the value of Sporting Memories to interviewees, reminiscence and why it matters, connections across the generations, how Sporting Memories and oral history preserve local history, helping to make clubs more resilient, increase community and civic pride, give an understanding of the club as living history, collecting stories and how to interview people, and then a list of about 15 to 20 different themes that you can put into a Sporting Memories interview. So it's sort of evolved over the years from very small beginnings when I was interviewing people completely untrained to being trained and developing more experience, and then tying it in with the dementia work that the Sporting Memories people do.
Yeah, and that's fantastic experience, Brian, and no doubt we'll be calling on that experience later on, and which leads me nicely also into the different. Pardon? Sorry, I did. Oh, I'm not sure. We've got some feedback going on. I'm not sure, yeah, we'll be talking about next, actually, what is oral history, and the difference between oral history and reminiscence. So what Brian's just told us about his experiences there, they are similar, they do relate one to the other, and they're both hugely valuable. But we're talking about an oral history project today, and so we need to know what oral history is. So I'm just going to share my screen now, and I'm going to, I've got a few slides to help with the presentation. So if you could bear with me a second while I just fiddle about.
Can I ask, please, will we be getting a copy of these slides, or are we frantically writing down now?
Sorry, just 1 second.
I'll jump in while Anita's just setting up. I will send everybody a copy of all Anita's slides and any of the links and resources that are shared in the chat, and anything else that any other follow-up bits. So you'll get a sort of a wrap-up email at the end, and a link to the recording as well.
Thank you.
You've got a whole package, so you don't have to scribble furiously. So.
Thank you.
Just one thing to say as well, we will be doing some interactive work today as well, just with your ideas and thinking about what I'm saying. So we'll talk about that as we go. First slide, just to show you planning your oral history project. I'm an oral historian. You've got my email address there, but you'll get that as well. And just to say, you and me got a whole lot of history. Right, so just moving on then, thinking about what oral history is. So oral history is the recording of people's memories, experiences, and opinions and attitudes. So that's the crucial thing, it's the recording of it. So we interview people to find out about their lives, about their memories, their first-hand experience, and we record it. Now with reminiscence, it's more about talking and about group work and about listening to and experiencing other people's memories with perhaps a memory box or photographs and all of those things. So there is a difference between oral history and reminiscence, although both work together beautifully. But what we must remember for an oral history project, these interviews are recorded. And oral history, it's a living history. I think it was Brian mentioned, it's a living history. It is, it's talking about people's memories, but it's also a living history. So everybody's memories, whether it's happening today, will become a history of the past. It's an opportunity for people to hear, to have their voice heard, to have their memories thought about and talked about, and to be able to express those memories. It's important that people are able to make their voices heard, because they could have been hidden for a long time. We may have heard a lot about the official history, but not about the lived experience of those people who were there at the time. History from the bottom up, if you like. And it's a chance for people who may not have had that experience to actually talk face to face with somebody about their experiences. And we've all talked about today already how important that is, to actually speak to people. Claire was talking about speaking to her neighbours and neighbourliness. It's really an important part of oral history. It's also a valuable source of new insights into a community, how they experience where they are. And you know, maybe it's again with Claire's neighbours, maybe they're new to the area, maybe they're not, maybe they've been there a long time. We can get new insights into how that community has changed and how they feel about it. So that's what we're talking about with oral history, and how it can sit alongside reminiscence. And reminiscence in a project is hugely valuable as a complementary part of oral history in a project. If you're doing an oral history project, just an oral history project, then that's also what we're talking about today. So looking at this slide that I've got here, I hope you can see all of that. I'm just going to move my view screen. It's a jumble. And that's very often how you feel when you're coming to a project at the start. You've got the ideas, you've got the stories, you've got the people, and you know you want to get those memories. How? What, you know, where do I start? I've got all these ideas. Where? What do I do next? And that's what we're going to talk about. So this slide really is just demonstrating that jumble of thoughts you may have right at the beginning of a project. Where do I start? Got all this stuff. I know it's great. I don't want to lose it. What do I do next? So that leads us on to the who, what, where, when, why, how, which can be part of any project, whether it's an oral history project or any other project. This is where you start. I have to know all of these things in my head, especially when you're going for funding. So funders will want to know answers to all of these questions. And so we're going to have a little interactive time now, thinking about all of these headings. Fran, shall I hand back to you for talking about annotate? We're going to use a whiteboard next.
Yes, I'll just do a quick introduction, and then I think the best thing is to let everybody have a go and see how they get on with. Yes, if you want to stop your share, and then I'll jump in on my end. Have people used the whiteboard facility on Zoom before?
No. No.
Wow, chance to try something new. So
this is great fun.
I'll put it up and then I'll talk through it. It's ever so easy. I make it sound as though it's more complicated than it is. Can everybody see that? So you should just have a white screen now.
Yeah.
And essentially everybody now has the ability to write on this screen. So if you see on your toolbar, you should have a second one in from the left-hand side. It says text. If you click on text, it will give you, and then you click on your screen, it should just give you a box, and then you can write, you can literally just type anything here. So
on my screen, Fran, I have view options, which I have to click on first.
Ah, okay, yeah. So are you on a Mac, Anita?
No.
Oh, okay. So maybe it just comes up differently from different people. So yes, you may need to view options, as Anita says. I get a toolbar that just has select, text, draw, stamp, spotlight, working its way across. The one to start with is text. You literally just click on the text option, click anywhere on the screen, have a practice having a type. Then if you want to get rid of what you've written, or you decide you want to change it, if you click on the eraser, you can then click on it and it takes it away again. So it's a way of, this is the online version of giving you all post-it notes if we were all in a room and getting you to put your post-it notes up on a board, so, or writing on the flip chart. So does everybody want to have a quick practice, and then we'll do the exercise that Anita's got planned for us and just check that you can write.
It doesn't matter if you can't. We can always use the chat and or speak.
Aha, Janet's there.
Janet's in.
How did you say you clear it, Fran?
So on your toolbar there should be an eraser tool, eraser option.
Got it.
Click on that and then click to where you wrote. That will then oh yes, brilliant, there we are. Everybody's got the hang of it. Brilliant. Right, well, back to you, Anita, to describe.
Okay, so we had if you remember back to that the screen with the who, what, when, where, why, let's think about who. So if we're asking our question about who is involved in our project, there's two aspects to this: who is involved and who is it for? And these are all questions that you will need to have answered ready when you're planning your project, especially if you're going for funding, and I suspect most people will have to get some funding of some sort. So who, let's if we could just put some ideas. Let's think about first, who's involved in this project? Is there a team, or is it just you? Is it volunteers? Will you have staff? Think about who is involved in the project. You just want to, or in the chat, wherever you want to put it. Let's see if we can get something up there. It's great. It's great. Janet's got a team of people. Who else might be involved in it? Volunteers, yeah, absolutely. Well, you hope. I hope you'll have lots of volunteers. Any more ideas for that? Project lead, PT support person, volunteer, peer support. Yeah, absolutely. All of those things. Good. What about you? Are you involved in this? Yeah, project lead. Great. I think Fran might be able to move some of these around. Good. Okay, so let's think about who is it for then? Who is this project for? Because this is another important aspect that funders will want to know. Who is it for? Is it for yourself? Is it for your museum? Is it for your fans? Yeah, England Netball. And is that, are you also trying to attract a new audience? What about new people to your organisation? It's for individual community members and community groups. Good, yeah. Archives, new and existing members, school children, care home residents. All of these things are absolutely fundamental, because the more you can demonstrate to a funder the number of different audiences you can speak to, the better. What about legacy? What about what you're leaving behind? Who is it for? For the people that have been before you? And what about future generations? All of those things come into your thinking and your planning about why and what and who and where, and all of those things we're going to talk about next. Okay, so Fran, do you want to clear? I think you can save them actually.
Yep, I'll save the whiteboard.
And then if we could clear that. Yeah, past and future legends of netball, absolutely.
Right, shall I clear it or do you want me to stop the share?
No, you can, I think have you saved it, Fran?
Yeah, it's all saved.
Yeah, and then we can clear it.
As in stop the share and go back to us all being on the screen.
I think you can just clear them all off.
Okay.
Yeah. Good. So let's think. So that was who. That's who is involved and who is it for. What about what then? What is your project? What is it? Not in depth. I just mean, is it an oral history project? Is it a wider project? Think about what your project might be. Is it for an exhibition? What is your project for? What is it? Some of this will cross over with what we had before. Are you thinking about taking it into schools? So we've got an oral history and community. I think that means a community resource. Collect memories to use in an exhibition, books to share online, cross-curricular education resources. Perfect. Claire's page is frozen. Not sure what's happened there. Perhaps if you'd like to put it in the chat, Claire, that will be fine. My personal project is for archives and for the monthly magazine that every member of EN receives. Be on display at events. Brilliant. Hidden history of Welsh women's football. Perfect. And we could also think, is this for adding, is this project going to add to your website? Is it going to be a virtual museum? Are you going to have an online museum? Maybe you've decided against a physical exhibition or museum. You may not have the resources for a physical museum, so it could be an online museum. Education resource we've already had. What about performance? Some projects involve a performance element. So you can take the oral histories or parts of your project and turn them into a drama for schools or for a community group. There's so many different things that you can do with that project. What is it though? You have to know what my project is. Is it an oral history project? Is it a wider project than that? Is it a community project? Is it a project for an in-depth oral history where I'm going to record in-depth interviews with several or even one person about their life in depth? It may be lots of interviews over several weeks, months, year even. Lots of in-depth stuff. An oral history and community cohesion connection problem, yes, absolutely. Attract publicity from local media, share through website downloads, musical performances of old club songs. Yeah, all of those things. And it will be all of those things and more. You know, we're not going to cover everything today. We you know, if this is a short time that we have together. Brilliant. Okay, so shall we move on to, we've had what? Let's move on to where. That's an interesting one. If Fran could just remove all those, and if you have a think about, so where is my project going to take place? This will be a question that funders will ask. Where is my project going to take place? Is it physical? Is it online? Those sort of things. Where am I going to have my outputs, which we'll talk about later too. We've got Claire back on the screen. The way the game has changed and the rules, it will also be on the website. Lots of interviews with legends.
Yeah, that's that's
Is that the last one?
Yeah. Shall I erase it?
You can erase that one. Well done. Schools, care home, club ground, town centre, museum, perfect. And this question, you know, the more that you can define where your project is going to happen, will be really useful when you are forming your answers for your funding applications. It also helps you to think about, what facilities have I got? If I want to do this in a physical museum, have I got the actual space to do it? So think about where this will happen. Is it going to be a touring exhibition? Are you going to are you going to do display panels? Have you got artifacts? Will you display, allow your interviews to be heard within a display? All these things have to be taken into account. We've got here in person, in a place in which the interview feels comfortable, garden, and the background sound is not too loud. Yeah, that's all thinking about the physical space where you're going to do your interviews. And that has actually come into focus a lot more because we haven't been able to do face-to-face interviews. So that's really interesting. Where am I going to do this? Where is my project going to happen? Where am I going to display it? Where am I going to use it? All of those things. Is it going to be local or is it going to be further afield? Am I going to take it around schools, as we say, care homes? Good. Let's think about how we're going to do it then. How are we going to do our project? We've got another one there. Clubs, hospitality, boxes, care homes, schools, distribute CDs. Yep. Face-to-face, Zoom, wherever it is available. There is a whole lot of consideration about interviewing over Zoom because the quality of the recording won't be good enough for archival purposes, and that's something we have to think about. Is the the actual recording. Obviously, if you were going to record somebody and it was desperately urgent, you would do it anyhow. You know, you would just record anyhow. But we do have to think about, for funders and for oral history projects, there's definitely a quality that needs to be adhered to, because you can't archive in poor quality formats, basically. And all of the information you need about recording is actually on the Oral History Society website, which we'll put a link to later. So Zoom, yes, but recording on Zoom, quality wise, is quite difficult. Good, okay. And then we have when. So when are we going to do this? When are we going to do our project? We need a realistic timeline. What do we have to think about when we're trying to decide when this is going to happen? And again, this is another question that funders will ask you. So if we can clear this one down and think about when our project is going to happen. Are you thinking about it for 3 years' time? Is there a centenary coming up? Is there a special anniversary coming up? When are you thinking, even if your project is just a seed, a germ in your mind at the moment, when would you like to do this? When are you going to do it? You need a deadline. I can hear lots of tapping. It's not, I can't see it on my screen at the moment. So you're thinking about, how long is it going to take you to put the team together? We've got here one from Janet. England Netball celebrate 100 years in 2026. There's several oral histories that will be required, hopeful by this date. So that then tells you 2026 is your aim for date, isn't it? Giving you plenty of time to plan your project. Coincide with specific anniversary, i.e. this year is 50 years since end of women's football ban. Absolutely. That gives you an idea of where and how long you've got to plan this project. Timescale agreed with funders when interviewees and volunteer interviewers are available, coinciding with significant dates. We've got lots of significant dates here. Spring 2022 for development, summers of 22-23 to allow outdoor interviews. Yeah, all of this needs to be thought about when you're starting to plan your project. Because if you're thinking, okay, in 6 weeks' time, we've got our centenary coming up. 6 weeks isn't going to be long enough. So you've got to plan ahead, think about when you've got to do all this by. It also takes, and Fran will agree here, it takes a long time to get your funding application written in and agreed. So bear that in mind too. How long is it going to take my funding application to come through? What can I do in the meantime? When overseas players are here, absolutely. And availability of interviewees. All of that has a bearing on how long it's going to take you to plan your project and to get it ready and up and running. And believe me, it takes a lot of time. It does take a lot of time. Good. Okay. And then finally, let's go to how. Let's think about how we're going to do our project. How are we going to do it? How are you going to carry out your project? Training volunteers in techniques and legalities. Yeah, very important one. It's training. How are you going to do it? Have you got the time? within a data management framework. That's an interesting one. Who I haven't got names on here.
That was mine. That was just one of the things that I kind of started to pull together when I put in my project inquiry. My sister is a digital humanities lecturer.
Mm-hmm.
Gave me lots of advice on the way to organize and name my files, and ultimately look after the GDPR side of things and the ethical side of things. Make sure that there weren't loads of duplicates, but there were enough duplicates and things like that.
That is just amazing, Claire. That is so perfect. I mean, everybody has to have a cataloguing system. Everybody has to know how to access that system, because if you can't access it, you can't use it. GDPR, huge, of course. All the ethical considerations all need to be gone into. Yeah, absolutely. It's a really fundamental point. Without funding, it's very difficult. However, prepare a plan, put in dates to achieve, will be dependent on volunteers. Yeah. Planning questionnaires with generate open-ended club-specific questions, training volunteers. Yeah, it's all, I mean, it's such a huge question. How am I going to do it? Do I have the time to do it? Do I have the resources to do it? Do I have the people with me, or am I expecting to do it all myself? Creating a toolkit for, yeah, brilliant. Do I have the funding?
End off my sentence.
Lost the end of the sentence. You know, do I have the funding? Do I have the facilities? Have I got the space? Have I got the space to actually interview people, or do I need to go out? Do I need to hire somewhere? How am I going to do this? Have I got enough people around me? Have I got enough trained people around me? Have I got enough trained volunteers? How am I going to do this? And do I have the knowledge to be able to do this? All of those questions need to be answered. So I'm going to move on quickly now. Thank you. That was a great interaction there, and I hope it helped you to think a bit more about what you need in order to start planning your project. All those things need to be thought about, and more. You know, there's way more than that, but that will give you a start. I just wanted to briefly also mention, you need to, and you'll see it called scope your project. You need to scope your project. And quite honestly, it's a good idea to talk to your funding officers, if it's Sport England, if it's Heritage Lottery Fund, regional networkers. They will know if anyone else is doing the same sort of project or has done a project that you don't know about. I mean, you know, with football, maybe somebody else nearby you is doing the same sort of thing, and you can partner up with them, because partnerships are so important. But talk to the funding officers and the regional networkers on the Oral History Society network. Oral History Society website has an absolute knowledge bank that if you want to know anything, it's on there about oral history. So go to them, talk to them about your project that you're thinking about before you put too much time and effort into it. Is it the kind of thing that they want to fund? They can help you to mold your project in a way that will be what they're looking for as well, funders. It needs to be what they are looking for. So opportunities for partnerships, they'll be able to tell you, and also Sporting Heritage. Fran will have a huge bank of knowledge about people who are already planning their projects, and Fran and the other Sporting Heritage colleagues will be able to put you in touch with different people working on different things. Also, you'll need to show that there is a demand for your project. Find out from your audience, from your network, why your project is needed. why is there a demand? Why people want this? Because that will also be a fundamental part of putting in to your funding bid. So good. I think that's given us quite a lot to think about there. If we move on now to a bit more detail. So if I share my screen now, Fran, is that all right with you? So that's what we've just done, the who, what, where, why, when, how, the usual questions that we all need to think about. Of course, it's not moving on. There we are. Okay, so now I've got here the kind of thing your brain might be doing at the moment. A load of post-it notes, a load of ideas, a load of things to think about. Oh my goodness. Okay, where do I go from here? So if we think about what is needed, so we talked about the who, what, where, when, why, how. Now let's delve into that a bit more and think about also what we're going to need. We're going to need perhaps some staff, are we? Got to think about that. We've got to think, and I'm just dodging about here on the post-it notes, because that's how you kind of feel right at the beginning, unless you're really super organized and you've already got all this down. This is the kind of thing you're going to be thinking about. Oh my goodness, you know, I've got all this stuff. Equipment. What equipment do I need? Can anybody chime in with that? What equipment might I need for my project?
I've got a Tascam handheld recorder and a little wind muff to go on top of it.
Yeah, ideal if you're recording outside, because otherwise you get all the wind noise, don't you? Yeah, you'll need recording equipment. You will need recording equipment. I use a Zoom H4 or just a simple basic Zoom. It's not Zoom that we're using today. It's a recording brand. Really simple. You've got to think about what equipment you need for volunteers to be able to use. If you've got volunteers going out to interview, they need to have simple equipment that they can use easily. All of these things need to be thought about. What will I need? Equipment. What about training? What do we think about training? Yes, Janet, yeah?
Well, so far on this course this morning, yes, I think we need training.
What kind of training do you think might be needed?
I think we need to get in our mind what we actually need to get from an interview to put into an oral history, and then the training on how we get there.
Yeah, so oral history training, oral history interview techniques training. If you've never done it before, you do need some training. Your volunteers may need training. Anybody who's going out to interview people will need some oral history training. You can do it, but if you want to do it properly, and funders will want to see training. It's a good outcome to have trained lots of different volunteers, for example. It's a real plus, and you need to be able to interview properly. It might be training on transcription. It might be training on evaluation. There's all sorts of things you've got to think about there. What about outputs and outcomes? Should we just talk about that for a minute? Does everybody know, or would anybody like to tell me what's an output and what's an outcome?
I have no idea what an output exactly is in this as kind of as a term within oral history, but the outcomes that I look for in my work are the benefits, the provable benefits that I usually get by doing a before, middle and after survey of the people that have participated to build part of my evaluation. So I can express outcomes through the data that I pick up on at those 3 points during my project.
Yeah, exactly. So outcomes is the benefits that you've brought, the training that you've done, and how it's affected people. Outputs are your exhibition. You might do 20 interviews. You might have run X number of workshops. That's your outputs. Fran, would you like to add anything to the outputs and outcomes?
Yeah, so I think you've been quite clear, actually. Yeah, so the outputs are sort of, I quite often think of them as sort of the physical things that come out of your project, whereas the outcomes quite often are the more intangible things. It's the change of attitude, it's the journey that people have been on, the skills they might have learnt, that sort of thing. You know, the cohesion, particularly talking about your project, Claire. You know, that sort of sense of community that will have grown out of your project, or the gain of knowledge, maybe, you know, for maybe for Janet's project or for Nick's project, where people are learning more about the sport or people's experiences. So yeah, sort of is that difference between tangible and intangible, I always think of it. And I'm trying to work mine out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Fran. Is everybody clear with that? Because it's really important from the funding application point of view that you know you have outputs and outcomes, and they will expect both. What about evaluation? What do people think of as evaluation?
A combination of outputs and outcomes, and how that's recorded mainly for your funders to prove that they've got value for money. Yeah.
The evaluation of the project is really important. Those of us who are sports coaches, it's also about self-evaluation and reflection, and about what everybody has got out of the project. I would suggest that you do your evaluation right from the start. Start collecting feedback, start collecting information right from the start. And I always think of it a bit like if any of you have written an academic essay, if you leave your referencing right to the end, it's a nightmare. So don't try to do your evaluation all at the end. Gather it as you go along, gather information. And it doesn't have to be just feedback forms and numbers. You can get evaluation in recorded reactions. Let's say you run an exhibition session, you might get people to say how they feel about that exhibition. That's all valuable information for your evaluation. Let's think about volunteers. What do we think about volunteers and how we might go about getting them? Does anybody want to chip in there?
Usually a project arises because volunteers are keen for it to happen, so rather than you looking for volunteers, it's quite often the other way around, that the reason it's arising because there's that enthusiasm and interest to start with.
Yeah, a willing and excited band of volunteers can really help form your project in the first place. And you're right, Brian. Very often a volunteer will say, look, you know, I've heard this story, I really love it. You've also got to form how you're going to use your volunteers. How do you think you might use your volunteers?
Find out about what their particular skills, interests and enthusiasms are, and try to make the absolute most of the abilities that they've got. Yeah,
absolutely. Because it's all very well saying, oh, I've got 30 volunteers, but if you don't know what they do, if you don't know what their special interest is, you don't know what their skills are. So it's quite a, you know, it's quite a task to actually get your volunteers interested and keep them excited. Because if you don't give them something specific to do or ask them to do, then they will quickly lose interest or feel like they're not valued. So volunteers and managing volunteers is actually a really important part of your planning, how you're going to do it. I'm whizzing about here in different post-it notes, but theme. Now, most of you already told us what your interest is and what your theme would be for your project, but it is really important that you have that that focus on what your theme is, and it's not too wide, it's not too vague, because you're going to have to describe this on your funding application. Your theme, what's it about? What's the nugget that it's about? Staff is an interesting one. What do you think staff might mean? Does anybody have any views on that? Nick, have you got are you employed at Wrexham? Do you have a?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, full time. So we have we've got quite a small museum team in Wrexham. So yeah, I think if we did an oral history project, we'd have to think carefully about kind of staff time and try and balance that with volunteers as well, I think. So yeah, we don't have a huge team. So that, yeah, definitely be a consideration, I think.
Yeah, so that's might be a consideration for your funding application. Do we bring in a project manager?
Yeah.
Do we bring in somebody to do training? All of those things, because, and it goes back to how are we going to do it? Do we have the staff resources? Do we have the time? We're already working full time in the museum. Do we have time to also do this? And we've got to think about how we can incorporate that project with using volunteers, with perhaps employing another staff member, a freelance member, let's say, to project manage that project or whatever you have in mind. And it's a really important thing, because if you get overwhelmed with a project, and it can be, believe me, all consuming when you're doing a project, and it does help to have thought about that beforehand. Can I do this? Do I need more help? Do I need more staff?
Sorry, working within a club, you've usually got direct staff that you're involved with from the community foundation, but then there's also peripheral staff to the project that you need to engage with throughout the club. So particularly the PR department, where you need publicity, who are also the department that often have access for interviewing players, the catering department if you need to run an event, the ground management department if you need to hire one of the facilities within the ground. So there's all sorts of staff within a club, yeah, besides the people that you're directly working with, which is usually the community foundation.
Yeah, and that's where you're working with a bigger organization. If you're working with a big organization, you've got that that luxury, if you like, of all those people to call upon, and that is just fantastic. I remember when I ran a project myself, a Stawball Heritage project, it was me. It came down to me, and whilst I could bring in some volunteer help, I still found it all consuming, and that was mainly because it was a passion as well. It was something I definitely wanted to do for my sporting history. So you've got to think about those things. Do I have those resources to call upon? If you've got a big club or an organization, that is fantastic. I mean, to be able to call on those people is brilliant. One thing to mention as well when you're doing your funding application is payments in kind. What you can bring and add to your match funding, if you like. So you're asking your funder for X amount, and then you can calculate what you're bringing as payment in kind, and that will be not actual money, but time, and it can all be calculated. And I think we have there's a link that we've got that we can send to you, or Fran might be able to put it in the chat, send it to you afterwards. It's an Oral History Society document about how to budget for different skills and different people that you might be bringing in. It's a really useful document. It's from 2019, but it's very, very helpful when thinking about how much are things going to cost me. If I bring in an oral history project manager, what should I put in my funding bid for that person? Really helpful. Lastly, I'm going to talk about interviewees. Now, I think that this will be obvious to most of you, but is it? Where are we going to get our interviewees from? Anybody want to throw in there?
I'm going to be going to some of the mutual aid groups. There's been a massive explosion of volunteering over lockdown. Mm-hmm. And lots of the groups I've been talking to are finding that things are tailing off just because there's less to do, but they want to retain the connections that have been made over that period of time.
Yeah.
So that of volunteering might help all of us, even though we're not necessarily working in the same field that I'm working in. That attitude change, or shift that there has been over lockdown.
Yeah, and that's going to be a really valuable thing to record and document, isn't it? That change that may have happened about people's attitudes towards volunteering. Where we have a project, let's say it's football, let's say it's netball, any of those things where there's kind of an obvious group of people that we've got lined up. What are you going to do if you've got 50 people that want to be interviewed, or that you feel should be interviewed? You've got to think about, how am I going to do that? It takes a long time, and then you've got to be selecting your interviewees, and that's quite tricky. That is quite tricky. But also to be thinking outside of your demographic, if you like, outside of your obvious. Thinking of, I think Brian mentioned earlier about groundsmen, interviewing the groundsman, interviewing the person that washes the kit, not just the players, not just the people directly involved, but the people on the periphery, people on the outside that may not have been heard before. Think about different interviewees, different ones that aren't interviewed all the time. Does anybody else want to add anything about interviewees?
Yeah, the Supporters Association is usually a good way into making lots and lots of contacts.
Yeah.
And something that we did at Huddersfield, actually along with the Sporting Memories Foundation, we ran a memories match, and we had kids from 3 schools with voice recorders outside the ground before the game, interviewing supporters randomly as they came to the match, it wasn't just good to collect some memories, but it was also really good publicity as well, because the local press got engaged with it being a memories match, and the program was all about the players' memories and supporters' memories, and it became sort of the theme for the day.
Yeah, I mean, that's great, isn't it? Get the media involved, because you do need that. You know, it might not be something that we're good at, actually promotion and sharing. Most of us are quite au fait with social media and all of those sort of things, but the outside media as well, getting publicity, getting the press, getting people to know about your project is also important. So there's all sorts of things that we could add to this screen. I just didn't have space for any more, but this list is not exhaustive by any means, and these are all, and this is just a few of the things you need to think about. One I haven't put on there, which I think Claire mentioned earlier, which is a really good prompt, is archiving. Where will your outputs be archived? Are you going to have it archived in the British Library? Are you going to archive it in the local record office, local university? Where are you going to archive these things? Because in an oral history project, these things need to be available. They need to be available to researchers, people who were interested, all sorts of education resources. If they're not available, then they can't be accessed. They have to be accessible in a particular form, and you need to check with wherever you're going to archive these records. You need to check with them how they want them. They will want them, you know, in a high quality audio. They won't want MP3. They want MP4. They won't want it to be in a low quality output, unless it's old, unless there was no other way of collecting that information. But you need to talk to the archivists where you're going to archive your material. So that's really important. And transcription was the other one. You need to build into your funding time to transcribe your interviews. Now, it can be a timed summary interview. It can be a verbatim word for word transcription, but it must be written or transcribed, sorry, in an accessible form. People can find what they're looking for. Mostly it's timed summaries, so that if someone wants to look up what was it like kicking an old leather football, that's at 5 minutes 42. Joe talks about, well, what's quite pertinent at the moment, heading a heavy leather football. Researchers, students, academics, whoever it might be, need to be able to access that material. They will not sit and listen to an hour interview. They need to be able to go to the part and find what they want. Okay, so does anyone...
Sorry, can I just jump in really quickly, just talking about archiving?
Yeah.
And just going back to, I know that a number of people have mentioned recording on Zoom. You just need to be careful, because the audio files that come out of Zoom are a different format to what is normally acceptable in a larger, you know, archive. It is possible to convert them, but it's something you would need to build into your planning and have that chat, as Anita said, with whoever you're going to archive with. And even if you're archiving within your own organisation and looking at doing Zoom recordings, just look at how you would do that conversion and build it into your planning. I've been working with another client where they've been doing a lot of interviewing over Zoom and been trying to get to the bottom of how they do it, because I think it's M4A files that come out of Zoom.
Yeah.
And it's just a slightly different format, and you just need to get the tech right to do the conversion, and obviously that takes time and resources and possibly a little bit of funding to make sure you can get it converted appropriately.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. Know before you do any recording what the archive wants, because they won't take it if it's not right, and then that would be, you know, that would be a real shame. And plus, for your funding, you need to know these things. Okay, so I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to move on. Does anybody else have anything to add to that? I think I've thrown quite a lot at you there. Right, so let's just round up now then, and thinking about your own project ideas. What will you do first? All of that stuff I've thrown at you. If you're planning your project, what are you going to do? What are you going to do first? What are you going to do, Nick?
Good question. I know, yeah, certainly the idea that I've hinted at is that I know that there are definitely a lot of stories to tell about women's football in Wales during the ban that's not really out there. And I've had a good conversation with an independent researcher who's done quite a lot of interviews himself. So I guess it will be trying sort of flesh out a bit more of a plan as to who those people are, where they can be found in the country. Also, he's got some knowledge on I think some people he spoke to are more willing to participate than others. So you probably use his help, and also you probably need some other interviewees help to maybe get to some of the other more difficult people that are a bit reticent about joining in maybe. yeah, so I think kind of fleshing out that plan a bit more with the help of somebody that's also done some work in that area, I think kind of helped me.
Yeah, good. So it's already started to formulate in your mind what you need to be thinking about. So that's great. What about anybody else want to chip in there?
I think we started sort of bottom up and looked at where can we get the interviews from? Who are the people we want to interview? How can we get to them and write out how we're going to make this work? So we started absolutely with what do we want our final outcomes to be in terms of also outputs to be in terms of who we're going to interview and what they're going to tell us.
Good. Yeah, I mean, exactly. You have to start somewhere. But if you've got those questions in your mind, take one of them and start thinking about your plan before you do anything else. Anybody else? Janet, are you?
What we've got, and now it seems to me like it's forever, we've got a list of what people of who people have said are legends, but in fact that to some ways contrary to what I'm thinking as well. And I have also mentioned this because the legends aren't the people with national honours, aren't the people who've played for England, aren't the people who've won every trophy under the sun. Some of the majority of the legends are the people who run the leagues, the people who go every week and provide the facility and run the leagues and the umpires that turn up. So the list that I've got recognises those people for me that are the elite, where we've got to also concentrate on not the elite, but actually at the level where the netball, the grassroots starts.
Yeah, so, you know, one question you're going to have to ask is how, because that's a huge number of people and fantastic. I mean, you know, how are you going to do this? That's a, you know, great question to be asking itself, isn't it? How? I know what, but how? What about you, Ruth? Have you anything to add there?
I don't know. What will I do first? Go away and read all the notes I've just taken. I've got a bit more time and think, oh no, I haven't done that.
But even that, Ruth, is giving you a structure to start thinking about what you might do. Yeah. You know, it's given you those thoughts that you need to be having to whatever project you might come up with. You've now got a structure to work to be able to plan.
Yep.
So even if you're not ready, you've got it there. And we've also got Claire, I think.
I've written an overview, which was, you know, I had the idea for the project after I spent the summer kind of getting to know my neighbours, despite having lived here for 12 years. You know, our relationships really changed. So I had that idea. I've rewritten the overall plan, I don't know how many times. But now my big job is to get supporting letters from organisations, you know, like local area coordination networks and things like that. And I've also made contact with the education and outreach officer at the Mass Observation Archive, the KEEP at University of Sussex, because I really want, I mean, I don't know why I haven't written to the British Library yet. Oh, because I can't find a direct contact actually. But University of Sussex with the Mass Archive would be my ideal archive. So securing that archive, I know, is quite important to be able to get funding. You have to be able to prove that you've got a repository for it, you know, at the end of the project cycle.
Yeah, the Mass Observation Archive is an incredible resource. I'm not sure that they take on projects in the way that you're thinking, but it'd be great to talk to them. And they are just down the road from both me and Fran. So we're very, very lucky. And on my master's degree, sorry, talking sideways, my master's degree, I did a module in the Mass Observation Archive, and it was just the best.
The woman that I've been in touch with, who's the education and outreach officer there, she's really interested in partnering on this project, because their remit is UK wide, but they don't have the funding to support a UK wide mass observation anything.
Yeah,
they are up for partnering. Quite whether they'll be up for archiving, I don't know, but it won't be a huge amount to archive really, so hopefully it might work out.
No, I mean, and you know, we talked a little bit about partnering, but it is such a valuable thing to be thinking about. Who can I partner with? Whose knowledge can I draw on? Whose help can I get? Who else will be interested in my project? And mass observation, just just yes. Have I covered everybody? I think I have covered everybody there, so I'll just move on. I can move my screen. Okay, just a quick roundup there, quick roundup scheme. Is it even possible? Is my project possible? Yes, it is possible, but it's going to take some planning. It's going to take lots of thought, lots and lots of discussion, a lot of writing, funding, applications. We've got our ideas, we've got our to-do, we've got doing, and we've got done. We've done it. One thing I haven't really talked about much, and it's on this screen, it's the sort of swirly spiral, is creativity. How am I going to deliver my outputs? How am I, when I do an exhibition, how am I going to use my oral histories? That's a sound wave in a pattern, but how can I be creative about what I'm doing? How can I get people to listen to it? In the bottom left there, my team of people. Who's my team? Who's my team? We're all talking about sport. We know about teams. Who are my interviewees? Who are my interviewers? Who's my team? Who's good at transcription? Who doesn't want to be doing interviews but really likes organizing events? All of those things. Funding. Little pot of money there. We're all going to need funding, whether it's self-funded or whether it's through a funder. We all need to be able to fund the project. I see we're really running out of time now, so I'll just move on to my last screen. That's kind of what a project feels like, that picture, to me anyway. There's a path. There's all sorts of odds and ends going on. It's an open book. And I've put a little quote there for you. Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. Planning, all of it. All that planning that you put in at the beginning will pay off when you come to put in your funding and you come to do your project. If it's well planned, you will succeed, but you've got to start. You've got to start somewhere. So just to finish up then, does anybody have, I know I've not left you very much time, but if there's any questions that you have on what you've heard today, or you're just a bit overwhelmed with it all?
I'm completely overwhelmed with it all. Having said that, it's made me probably more enthusiastic. I was enthusiastic, I'm possibly more enthusiastic, but I also now realise that I need a really good team around me. And also I need to get the whole of the country involved, because we've got legends throughout the whole of the country. And if we really want to tell the story of netball, then every league, every county, every region has got to be as enthusiastic as I am.
Yeah. You've got a big... Sorry.
You go, Anita, go on.
I was just going to say, you've got a big project there, Janet.
Yeah, very
exciting. Very excited. I'm glad though that you've been able to think about all those different things you're going to need, and that it's made you more excited. That's perfect.
Yeah. I like learning. Even at my age, I like learning, and so consequently, this is good for me.
Never stop learning, Janet.
No,
never stop
no,
learning.
never.
Sorry, Fran.
And then what I was going to jump in and coming with my funding hat on, it may be, yes, you've got this enormous UK-wide network with, as you say, people at all levels and all different types of involvement in the game. Don't be afraid of setting up, because this is new to you, a pilot project with the idea that you'll trial it out and trial out all the skills and all the organisation you might need, maybe just on your geographic area or region, and you can put that in a funding bid with the idea that you're going to try it all out. It's your scoping, and then if you're successful, you can say to them, and then we will come back to you for further funding to roll this out as a model of working. We will then roll this out for all the different regions and look to train up the regions. So you can approach a massive project that way, and then that also might make it easier when you're choosing who you need to interview, because obviously that long list, if you can put a manageable parameter around there, so you're not going to offend the legends and the elite players in a different part of the county. You say, well, actually we're finding our feet and we're setting it up. We're going to do the pilot in this particular area, so therefore I'm choosing these 6 people maybe, and just make sure that it all works for you, and then with a view to go back for bigger funding. And people, particularly people like Heritage Fund, really like that approach, because you're showing them that you've thought through the scope of your project, and then you're also proving to them that you're a safe pair of hands, so that when you go back for that second bite of the funding cherry, they can see that you've already delivered a really good, strong project. So don't be afraid at starting small and expanding it, and it's quite a good way to scale a project.
Thanks, Fran. Thank you.
Yeah. If it's the Heritage Lottery Fund, they will almost tell you they want you to do a pilot project if it's as big as national, and they'll guide you through that anyway. And if you get funding for the pilot, you're probably an 80% chance of getting the full funding if the pilot works.
Yeah, it's always worth speaking. If you know which fund you want to go to, whether it's Heritage Fund, Arts Council, one of the other bigger sort of trusts of foundations, there's always somebody within that organisation that you can talk to about your funding proposal. So you don't need to go to them with your application all fully formed. Sorry if I'm telling you things you already know, but you can go and speak to one of their funding officers and say, this is what we're planning to do. Does this fit your remit? What advice would you give? And they won't look at your final application, but they can give you quite a lot of advice all the way through, so that by the time you come to submit, you can be confident you're submitting the best that you can do. And then it depends what happens when it all goes to panel, because you never know who else you're up against.
Yeah, that's so true. You can save yourself so much time before doing your application. Save yourself so much time by talking to those funding officers and the oral history regional networkers on the Oral History Society, because they will advise you. They've seen it before, they've done it before, and they can save you so much time that in guiding you towards what your project could be. But don't lose your idea, and don't lose your passion for it.
No, I shan't.
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything to add there?
Just one thing that was really valuable for us. The most valuable question that we asked in our questionnaires was to ask particularly older supporters about second-hand memories. So what did their ancestors, their fathers, their mothers tell them? And it really expanded the scope of what we could include in exhibitions and in archives by 30, 40 years, because we got some memories going back from people who are no longer with us. But as long as you sort of acknowledge it, this is a second-hand memory, so perhaps it's got watered down over the years, but it was still a really valuable question to ask to expand the scope of the project.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I mean, there's so much more we could have talked about today, so much more. Obviously, we can't fit it all into an hour and a half, but hopefully we've given you an overview of how to start planning, what to think about, and how to do that. So I think we're just about out of time, Fran. Are we? We are
just on time. So
just on time. Yes. Good.
So,
well, thank you so much for listening, everybody. And if anybody wants to contact me, my email address is there, and I'm sure Fran will send it out to you as well. Thank you very much, and good luck with your projects. Can't wait to hear about them.
Thank you very much.
Send everybody a wrap up, and it'll have all the information. Yes, and so just to echo what Anita said, thank you so much for your time today, and we'll be back in touch soon. Thank you.